I walked back downstairs in a daze and re-entered the living room. Jason was in the middle of a toast, his arm around his fiancée, Chloe, talking about love and building a future. All I could see was the man who had been secretly trying to destroy mine. The room fell silent as he finished his speech, and in that quiet moment, my voice, raw and shaking, cut through the air. "How could you?" Every head turned towards me. Jason's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion, then annoyance. "Em, what are you doing?" "I know what you've been doing," I said, my voice gaining strength with every word. I held up his phone, the screen still lit with the damning evidence. "I know everything." The color drained from his face. He knew exactly what I meant. The air crackled with tension. My mother took a step forward, her expression a mixture of confusion and alarm. "Emily, what is going on? Don't make a scene." But I was past the point of caring about scenes. I was a raw nerve, exposed and vibrating with 2 years of suppressed frustration and a fresh, gaping wound of betrayal. "Ask him," I said, my gaze locked on Jason. "Ask your perfect son why my last 3 major project proposals have been mysteriously leaked to competitors. Ask him about the anonymous HR complaints that nearly got me fired. Ask him why my professional reputation has been systematically shredded online by anonymous trolls who somehow know the intimate details of my work." I took a step closer, my voice dropping to a low, intense tremor. "Or maybe you should ask him about the emails on his phone, the ones to a company that specializes in destroying careers. My career." A collective gasp went through the room. Chloe looked from me to Jason, her beautiful face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. "Jason, what is she talking about?" Jason just stood there, speechless, his charm finally deserting him. He looked like a cornered animal. My father found his voice first, a low growl. "Emily, that's enough. You're hysterical." "Am I?" I shot back, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "I've spent the last 2 years thinking I was going crazy, that I was incompetent, that I was failing at the one thing I've ever been good at, and all this time, it was him, my own brother, stabbing me in the back while smiling to my face." I turned to Chloe, my heart aching for her. "Do you really want to marry a man who is capable of this? A man who would secretly, systematically try to destroy his own sister's life out of sheer jealousy?" Chloe pulled away from Jason, her eyes wide with tears. She looked at him, searching his face for a denial, for any sign that this was all a horrible mistake. But he offered none. He just stared at me, his eyes filled with a hatred so pure it was chilling. The party was over. The joyous atmosphere had evaporated, replaced by a thick, suffocating silence. Friends and extended family started to make quiet, awkward exits, murmuring excuses. My parents rushed to Jason's side, their faces a mixture of fury and concern, not for me, but for him. The Golden Boy's perfect day had been ruined, and it was all my fault. As I stood there, isolated in a sea of my family's disapproval, a single, agonizing thought echoed in my mind. Did I do the right thing? But how did we get here? Let's rewind a bit. Growing up, Jason was the sun, and I was a planet in his orbit. He was 2 years older, effortlessly charming, and popular without trying. He was the kind of person everyone was drawn to. Teachers, friends, and especially our parents. He wasn't a straight-A student, but he didn't need to be. He could talk his way into and out of anything. He was the star of the soccer team, the lead in the school play, the life of every party. I, on the other hand, was quiet, studious, and socially awkward. My successes were academic, the kind that were noted on report cards, but didn't win you any popularity contests. Our parents, though they would deny it, clearly favored him. They reveled in his social triumphs, basking in his reflected glory. My achievements were met with a polite, "That's nice, dear," before the conversation inevitably shifted back to Jason's latest exploits. It wasn't malicious, it was just the way things were. Jason was the story, and I was a footnote. I learned early on to carve out my own space, a world where Jason's charisma didn't matter. That world was technology. I fell in love with coding in middle school, the clean logic of it, the way you could build entire worlds with just lines of text. It was a place where my quiet focus was an asset, not a liability. While Jason was out with friends, I was in my room, teaching myself Python and C++, my mind buzzing with ideas. My ambition was a quiet but fierce fire. I dreamed of launching my own tech startup, of building something innovative and meaningful. I got a full scholarship to a top engineering school, graduated at the top of my class, and landed a coveted job at a prestigious software development firm right out of college. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was stepping out of Jason's shadow. I was building a life and a reputation that were entirely my own. Jason, meanwhile, seemed to be drifting. After college, he bounced between sales jobs, relying on his charm to get by. He was always talking about his next big idea, the one that was going to make him a millionaire, but he never seemed to follow through. He lived a life of expensive dinners, trendy bars, and a rotating cast of friends, all funded by a combination of my parents' generosity and the commissions from his latest gig. Our relationship as adults was complicated. On the surface, we were fine. We went to family dinners, exchanged pleasantries, and even occasionally hung out. But there was always an undercurrent of something else, a subtle tension that I could never quite put my finger on. He would make jokes about my nerdy job or offer unsolicited advice about how I needed to lighten up and network more. I brushed it off as typical older brother behavior, a little condescending but ultimately harmless. I was too focused on my own path to give it much thought. The first sign that something was wrong came about 2 years ago. I was leading a major project at work, a new software suite that was my brainchild. It was my chance to prove myself, to show that I had what it took to lead a team and deliver a high-stakes product. We were weeks from launch, and everything was going perfectly. Then, out of nowhere, our biggest competitor launched a strikingly similar product, beating us to market. The fallout was immediate. My project was shelved, and I was put on probation. My boss was sympathetic, but firm. "I don't know how they got the jump on us, Emily," he said, his face grim. "It's like they knew our entire roadmap." I was devastated. I racked my brain, going over every meeting, every email, trying to figure out where the leak could have come from, but I came up empty. I had been so careful. I chalked it up to a freak coincidence, a case of great minds thinking alike, and threw myself back into my work, determined to redeem myself. But it was just the beginning. A few months later, I was up for a promotion. It was a sure thing. My performance reviews had been stellar, and I was the most qualified candidate. The day before the announcement, an anonymous complaint was filed with HR, accusing me of creating a hostile work environment and taking credit for other people's work. The allegations were baseless, a collection of half-truths and outright lies. But the investigation took weeks, and by the time I was cleared, the promotion had been given to someone else. Again, I was left reeling, confused, and hurt. Who would do this? I had always maintained good relationships with my colleagues. I couldn't imagine any of them being so malicious. Then came the online attacks. I had started a small consulting business on the side, a first step towards my startup dream. I had a handful of happy clients and was slowly building a solid reputation. Suddenly, a flood of negative reviews appeared on my professional profiles. They were vicious and personal, attacking not just my work, but my character. They were anonymous, of course, but they contained just enough specific detail to sound credible to a potential client. My lead flow dried up overnight. Each incident was a body blow, chipping away at my confidence. I started to doubt myself, to wonder if I was the problem. Was I a bad leader? Was my work not as good as I thought? Was I, as the reviews suggested, an arrogant and difficult person to work with? The constant stress began to take its toll. I was anxious, irritable, and had trouble sleeping. I tried to talk to my family about it. I remember one Sunday dinner, sitting around the dining table, trying to explain the series of inexplicable setbacks that were derailing my career. "It just feels like I'm cursed," I said, pushing my food around my plate. "Every time I get close to a breakthrough, something goes wrong. It's like someone is actively working against me." My mother sighed, a familiar, weary sound. "Emily, don't be so dramatic. Everyone has challenges at work. You're just being too sensitive." "It's more than that, Mom," I insisted. "The HR complaint, the leaked project, it's too much to be a coincidence." Jason, who had been scrolling through his phone, looked up with a smirk. "Maybe you're just not cut out for the corporate world, Em. It's a shark tank. You've always been a bit of a wallflower." "That's not helpful, Jason," I snapped. "He's just being honest," my father chimed in. "You've always been a bit high-strung. Maybe you're just reading too much into things. You need to develop a thicker skin." I looked around the table, at their dismissive, unsympathetic faces. I felt a profound sense of loneliness. They didn't get it. They didn't want to get it. In their eyes, Jason was the charismatic success, and I was the overly sensitive, paranoid daughter who was probably exaggerating her problems. I dropped the subject, a cold knot of resentment forming in my stomach. The suspicion that someone was behind my troubles began to take root, but it was a vague, formless fear. I suspected a jealous colleague, a disgruntled former employee, anyone but someone in my own family. The idea that Jason could be involved was so monstrous, so unthinkable, that it never even crossed my mind. He was my brother. Annoying and condescending at times, yes, but not evil. The build-up to the engagement party was a whirlwind of activity. Chloe, bless her heart, had tried to include me in the planning, but I was so consumed by my professional struggles that I had little energy for cake tastings and floral arrangements. I was in the middle of trying to salvage a major freelance contract that was suddenly on the rocks. The client, who had been enthusiastic and supportive, had become distant and skeptical, citing concerns he had heard about my reliability. It was the same pattern, and I was exhausted by it. A week before the party, I was at my parents' house for dinner. Jason was there, regaling everyone with stories about his and Chloe's upcoming destination wedding. I was quiet, my mind elsewhere. At one point, I went into the kitchen to get a glass of water, and I overheard Jason on the phone in the hallway. He was speaking in a low, hushed voice, but I caught a few phrases. Make sure the final post goes live on Friday. A real bombshell. She won't know what hit her. My blood ran cold. He hung up as soon as he saw me, a flicker of something, panic, guilt, in his eyes before it was replaced by his usual easy smile. Hey, Em. Just closing a deal? You know how it is? I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. It was probably nothing. A sales deal. Why would I assume it was about me? I was being paranoid, just like my parents said. I pushed the thought away, burying it under a mountain of denial. The day of the engagement party arrived. I put on a brave face, determined to be happy for my brother, despite the turmoil in my own life. The house was beautifully decorated, filled with friends and family, and for a while, I almost managed to forget my troubles. Then came the moment that changed everything. Jason had left his phone on the charger in the upstairs study, while he and Chloe were making the rounds. I had gone up there to escape the noise for a few minutes, to gather my thoughts. The phone buzzed with a notification, and the screen lit up. It was an email preview. Subject, final phase of Project Nightingale. The message was from a name I didn't recognize, but the snippet of text visible on the lock screen made my heart stop. The final package has been delivered as requested. The target's consulting profile is now effectively neutralized, awaiting final payment. Project Nightingale. That was the code name for my biggest freelance project, the one that was currently collapsing. My hands shaking, I picked up the phone. It was unlocked. With a sense of dread, I opened the email. And there it was. A chain of correspondence going back 2 years. A detailed, horrifying blueprint of my brother's betrayal. He had hired these people to systematically destroy me, using information he could only have gotten from our conversations, from being in my life. The project leaks, the HR complaints, the online smear campaign. It was all him. The world tilted on its axis. The brother I thought I knew, the family I thought I had, it was all a lie. The air in the room felt thin, and a roaring sound filled my ears. I scrolled through the messages, each one a fresh stab to the heart. He had shared details of my anxieties, my hopes, my vulnerabilities with these strangers, all to be used as ammunition against me. He had done it all with a smile on his face, patting me on the back at family dinners, while secretly twisting the knife. The rage that filled me was a white-hot, purifying fire. It burned away the confusion, the self-doubt, the years of feeling small and inadequate. It was a rage born of a betrayal so profound, it defied comprehension. And that's when I walked downstairs and blew up his perfect life. The immediate aftermath was a blur of shouting and tears. My mother called me a monster. My father told me I was dead to him. Jason, after his initial shock, had switched to a full-throated denial, painting me as a jealous, unstable lunatic who had concocted this entire fantasy to ruin his happiness. "She's always been jealous of me," he yelled, his voice cracking with manufactured emotion. "She can't stand to see me happy, to see me succeed. She's pathetic." Chloe, to her credit, didn't seem to be buying it. She had left the party in tears, refusing to even look at Jason. His engagement was, for all intents and purposes, over. And I was the one holding the grenade. I left my parents' house in a daze, their angry words echoing in my ears. I drove to my apartment, the silence of the car a stark contrast to the chaos I had just unleashed. I walked through my front door and collapsed onto the sofa, the adrenaline finally leaving my body, replaced by a deep, bone-aching exhaustion. And then came the guilt. It crept in slowly at first, a small, insidious voice in the back of my mind. Did you have to do it like that? In front of everyone? I had a right to be angry. What he did was unforgivable, a betrayal of the deepest kind. But did I have to ruin his engagement? Did I have to humiliate him in front of his friends, his family, the woman he loved? I replayed the scene over and over in my head. The look on Chloe's face, the shock and hurt in her eyes, the way my parents had looked at me, as if I were a stranger, a venomous creature who had slithered into their home. I had wanted to hurt him, to make him feel a fraction of the pain he had caused me. And I had succeeded, but in doing so, I had also hurt innocent people. I had turned a celebration into a tragedy. My anger was a righteous fire, but had I used it like a blowtorch, burning down everything in my path? Was there another way? Could I have confronted him privately? Waited until after the party? But the thought of sitting through another minute of that celebration, of smiling and making small talk while this poison was coursing through my veins, felt impossible. The betrayal was too raw, too immediate. My reaction had been visceral, a primal scream of pain and rage that had been building for 2 years. I spent the next 2 days in a self-imposed exile, my phone turned off, ignoring the flood of angry texts and voicemails I knew would be waiting for me. I was adrift in a sea of conflicting emotions. One moment, I was consumed by a cold, hard fury, convinced that he deserved everything he got. The next, I was drowning in guilt, haunted by the image of the destruction I had caused. I felt utterly alone. My family had made their choice. They had closed ranks around Jason. My friends, while sympathetic, couldn't truly understand the depth of the betrayal. They offered comforting platitudes. "He's a monster. You did what you had to do." But it didn't quell the turmoil inside me. I was questioning my own moral compass. Was my public exposure of Jason a justified act of self-defense, or a vindictive, selfish act of revenge? Was I the hero of my own story, or the villain in his? The lines were so blurred I couldn't tell anymore. That's when I turned to the only place I could think of for truly impartial judgment: the internet. Specifically Reddit's Am I the Asshole community. It seemed absurd to turn to a forum of strangers for moral clarity, but I was desperate. I needed to lay out the facts, to strip away the emotion and the family history and see how it looked to an objective audience. I spent hours crafting the post, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I detailed our childhood, Jason's golden boy status, my own quiet ambition. I described the 2 years of sabotage, the inexplicable setbacks, the toll it had taken on my mental health, and then I described the engagement party, the discovery, and the explosive confrontation. I was brutally honest, both about his actions and my own. I didn't spare myself, detailing my rage and my desire for revenge. I ended the post with a simple, heartfelt plea. AITA for ruining my brother's engagement party after finding out he was secretly sabotaging my career. I know what he did was monstrous, but I can't shake the feeling that my reaction was equally monstrous. I destroyed his relationship and humiliated him in front of everyone we know. Was I justified, or did I become the asshole in my own story? I hit post and leaned back, my heart pounding. I had thrown my story into the digital void, and now all I could do was wait for the verdict. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My post shot to the top of the subreddit, and comments flooded in by the hundreds, then thousands. I spent the next few hours glued to my screen, reading through the torrent of opinions. The vast majority were firmly on my side. NTA, not the asshole, was the most common refrain. People were horrified by Jason's actions, calling him a sociopath, a narcissist, a monster. One comment stood out: NTA. He wasn't just sabotaging your career, he was engaging in a form of psychological abuse. He made you doubt your own sanity and competence for 2 years. What you did wasn't revenge, it was self-preservation. You didn't ruin his engagement, his own actions did. Chloe deserves to know the kind of man he really is. Another wrote, NTA. The timing might have been dramatic, but when else were you supposed to do it? Confront him privately so he could lie and gaslight you some more? Your family has shown they will always protect him. You needed to expose him in a way that he couldn't wriggle out of. You did the right thing. These comments were like a balm on my raw, frayed nerves. They validated my anger, my pain, my sense of injustice. For the first time in days, I felt seen. I wasn't a hysterical, jealous monster. I was a victim who had finally fought back. But not everyone was so quick to absolve me. There were a significant number of ESH, everyone sucks here verdicts as well. These were the comments that, in a way, I found most helpful. They didn't excuse Jason's behavior, but they did challenge my own. ESH. What your brother did is unforgivable, and he's clearly the bigger asshole. But you chose the most nuclear option available. You could have shown the evidence to Chloe privately. You could have confronted him with your parents as witnesses. Instead, you chose public humiliation. It feels like you were more interested in revenge than justice. ESH. I get why you did it, and I can't say I wouldn't have done the same in your shoes. But you have to acknowledge that your actions had collateral damage. You hurt Chloe, you hurt your parents, even if they are enablers, and you blew up any chance of a future relationship with your brother. It was an emotional, reactive decision, not a strategic one. These critiques stung, but they also resonated with the part of me that was wrestling with guilt. They forced me to look beyond my own righteous anger and acknowledge the complexity of the situation. Yes, Jason had built the bomb, but I had been the one to detonate it. I had to own that. Reading through the diverse feedback was like attending a masterclass in human psychology. The Reddit community, in its chaotic, collective wisdom, helped me see the situation from all angles. They helped me understand that my feelings of both justification and guilt were valid. It wasn't a simple case of right versus wrong. It was a messy, painful, human tragedy. The process gave me a sense of clarity I hadn't been able to find on my own. I wasn't looking for absolution, I realized. I was looking for understanding. And in the anonymous, often brutal honesty of strangers, I found it. I could accept that my brother's actions were monstrous without having to believe that my own reaction was perfect. I could forgive myself for not handling an impossible situation with perfect grace. A week after the party, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? It was Jason. His voice was quiet, stripped of its usual bravado. Can we talk? We met at a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop halfway between our apartments. He looked terrible. He had dark circles under his eyes, and he had lost weight. He didn't look like the golden boy anymore. He just looked like a man whose life had fallen apart. We sat in silence for a long time, the clink of cups and the low murmur of conversation filling the space between us. He was the first to speak. Chloe left me, he said, his voice flat. She said she can't be with someone she can't trust, someone who could be so cruel. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a confusing mix of resentment and something else, something that looked like shame. Why, Em? Why did you do it? You know why, Jason, I said, my voice steady. The question is, why did you do it? He looked down at his hands, turning his coffee cup in circles. I don't know, he whispered. I honestly don't know. But then he started talking, and for the first time in his life, he was truly honest. He talked about the pressure he had always felt to be the successful one, the charming one, the one everyone loved. He talked about how, after college, his life had felt like a series of failures, while mine was a steady, upward climb. You were so focused, so driven, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You were building something real, something that was yours. And I was nothing. Just a guy with a good smile and a bunch of empty promises. He confessed that my success had felt like a personal indictment of his own failures. Every time I achieved something, it was another reminder of how far he had fallen short of the expectations everyone had for him. The sabotage had started small, a petty act of jealousy, but it had spiraled, becoming a dark, obsessive secret that had consumed him. It was like an addiction, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Every time I knocked you down a peg, I felt a little bit better about myself. It was sick. I know it was sick. Hearing him admit it, hearing the pathetic, insecure truth behind his monstrous actions, didn't make me forgive him. The wound was too deep for that. But it did change something in me. The white-hot rage had cooled, leaving behind a profound sense of sadness. Sadness for the brother I thought I had, for the family we could have been, and for the broken man sitting in front of me. "I'm sorry, Emily," he said, tears welling in his eyes. "I know it doesn't mean anything now, but I am so, so sorry." I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw him not as a monster, but as a deeply flawed, insecure human being who had let his demons win. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Jason," I said, and the words were a relief, an honest acknowledgement of the chasm between us. "What you did broke something in me. It broke us." I stood up, my purse in my hand. "I'm not going to let you destroy my life. I'm going to rebuild my career, and I'm going to succeed. Not to spite you, but for me. And you? You need to figure out how to live with what you've done. You need to get help." I walked out of that coffee shop and didn't look back. The future of my family is uncertain. My parents are still barely speaking to me. The rift between us is a raw, open wound. But for the first time in a long time, I feel a sense of peace. The AITA post, the confrontation with Jason, it all led me to a place of clarity. I know who I am. I know what I'm capable of. And I know my own worth, not just as an engineer, but as a person. The path ahead is going to be difficult, but it's my path, and I'm walking it with my head held high, no longer in anyone's shadow.